Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I'm here with my spoiler-free review for The Belle of Belgrave Square by Mimi Matthews. This is the second book in the Bells of London series, which is a series of companion novels, and these are romances. As I said, this review is going to be spoiler-free. I also will have content warnings linked in the description, and I also want to mention that I received this ARC in exchange for an honest review. I also have already done a very short feature video on this book. I will link that if you want to get kind of an idea of some of the elements and tropes in this book. That was just a very brief kind of almost bullet point style list about, like, you know, you might like this book if this is the kind of thing you might find here, etc. So do check that out. This is going to be a more in-depth review on my thoughts. We are following our two main characters, Julia Witchwood and Captain Jasper Blunt. Julia is a girl who has social anxiety, very bad social anxiety, so the London season is pretty miserable for her, especially because her friends are actually all out of town now, her friend group, and she's just really unhappy. Her parents are also, they don't treat her super well. It's just a very difficult, like, home life for her, and in order to get away from them and in order to avoid a loveless marriage that they're trying to push her into, she decides to propose to Captain Jasper Blunt, a marriage of convenience, and that in return for her dowry, which will help him fix up his crumbling estate, he will basically just, like, leave her alone and she can just, like, read and stay in bed and not have to go to London, and that's kind of like the arrangement they have. And then Jasper is our other main character. He's obviously the hero, and he is known as the hero of the Crimea because he was in the Crimean War. He got a reputation for being very ruthless there, so, like, his reputation is kind of interesting in society because he's a war hero, but he's also kind of like bad news. Like, nobody really wants, like, their daughters, like, spending time with him and stuff like that. Plus, you know, he has this, like, crumbling estate, and there's also rumors that he has this, like, horde of illegitimate children running around the place. But Julia has met him and interacted with him before, and he doesn't seem to be the kind of person who would do the things that he did in the war. It seems like he has kind of turned over a new leaf, and because they get on so well, that's why Julia proposes to him. This is also kind of loosely inspired by Beauty and the Beast. I also want to mention that there are some specific books that this book kind of talks about in a way that will spoil them, some more than others. Like, definitely The Blue Castle by L.M. Montgomery is one of them, and then there's one by Wilkie Collins, I think. The Law and the Lady by Wilkie Collins, and Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. There might be another Law and the Lady book as well. And I also should mention that part of the contract on Jasper's side is that Julia will agree never to go into this particular room in his estate. And so about halfway through the book, they kind of set up this arrangement, they get married, they go off to his estate, and then we see their relationship develop. And for me, this was a like but not love. There were a lot of things I really enjoyed about it, but there were some key elements that didn't work for me, as well as the first book in the series. So I do want to first mention the synopsis. This is not like a detraction from the book, because, like, it's not the author's fault that whoever wrote the synopsis kind of did it this way. Even though the synopsis is correct, I think it does give you useful information about the book. The things that it talks about don't happen until 200 pages into the book. Like, we have a lot of, like, setup with these characters and getting to know them and their circumstances before we get to the actual marriage part, or like the arrangement part, about 200 pages in, which I did like getting to know the characters, especially Julia. I really enjoyed her, but I do think it's good to go into this book knowing that you'll have a lot of setup before you get to the actual, like, point of the book, which is the marriage of convenience plotline, because I kept waiting for that to happen, thinking it was going to happen earlier. And then kind of going along with that, I found the plot pretty slow in this book. I mean, it is mostly about the relationship, but it just felt like this book was a little longer than it needed to be, especially, like I said, with some of the setup. I also felt like the secret keeping aspect was a little annoying. Jasper has some big secrets that he's keeping from Julia, and it didn't bother me that I kind of figured out what those were, like, immediately. That didn't bother me. The thing that, like, was kind of frustrating is that I think that went on, specifically regarding Julia, way too long to be believable. There's part of what Jasper is keeping from her that I think makes sense why he would be very cautious, but there's another part that, like, I think we got to a point where it just didn't make sense why he wasn't telling her things. And just like with the secret keeping in general, like, the consequences of telling her, like, he clearly loves her and trusts her at this point, and the consequences of telling her, I think, would be a lot less serious than, like, what she already thinks is going on. So I didn't mind, like, that he was keeping these secrets from her. I just think that there were some things in particular that, like, he should have come clean about much sooner, and I think that was another thing I think that made this book feel a little longer than it had to, is, like, there was no reason for him to still be keeping that information from her. But as I was saying earlier, I did really love Julia as a main character. I really enjoyed her. She's she's got this core of determination that she kind of discovers throughout the book, and I really love that. I also love how much she enjoys reading and the overall focus of this book on stories and how powerful and important those are. That's one of the things that her and Jasper bond over, is their enjoyment of reading and like talking about their opinions on books and everything. And that's something, of course, that I loved. And I just really enjoyed Julia as a character. I really felt for her. I also really liked that she, like, some of the big choices that, or the big events that happen in this book are Julia's idea. Like, you know, the marriage arrangement, and then also some things that happen near the end. I really like that she took the initiative for that. I also enjoyed that Julia is such a, like, kind of dreamy romantic in a way. Like, she's not completely impractical or anything, but I just really liked the balance of her character, and I really felt for her and I cared about her, and I enjoyed her journey over the course of the book. And then also there are several like children characters in this book, and I've mentioned before that I think kids used as side characters in like adult books, especially romance books, can be, in my opinion, very poorly written. Like, it feels like they're just props to like make the story happen for the adults. And here that didn't happen. I really feel like these kids were very well written. I really liked them. I really liked their interactions with each other and with Julia especially. And I just feel like they felt like complete characters in their own right, even though they were side characters, as opposed to just like props to facilitate the romance of other characters. And then as far as the writing, I always really enjoy Mimi Matthews' writing style, and here that was no different. I think she does a great job of incorporating historical like information and context, so I really like that here as well. There are a couple of things though, and I've read I think maybe 4 of her books by this point, and even though I have liked her writing in all of them, there are also some things that I'm starting to notice that she does that are not my favorite. And one thing, I don't really know how to describe it except like almost like unnecessarily gendered descriptions or like writing, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal if it just happened once or twice per book, but it happens a lot. Like, a lot of the time that Jasper and Julia are together, it's like we're told about like her feminine softness and his masculine strength and his like masculine forearms and the strength of his manly shoulders, and like all of these things that, like, I know those are just, you know, description tropes that some people might not mind. That's something that I personally don't like, and to have those happen over and over was distracting for me. Like, I really didn't like that. And I also feel like it kind of got into like not just like gendered language, but like gender stereotyping with some of the characters sometimes, like, or specifically with Julia and Jasper. Like, I mentioned in my spotlight video that I really like that Jasper is not like an alpha character. Like, I don't like alpha males at all, so I really like that he wasn't like that. He was kind of protective, but not in a way that was too over the top. But one thing that I didn't care for so much is the way that that protectiveness kind of fed into some gender stereotypes. And I do get that this is a historical book and that would have been a very common way of thinking at the time, but I think there are ways to show that in a way that doesn't like communicate that that's romantic to a modern audience. And I kind of felt like this book was doing that, at least to me. Like, I just didn't like the romanticizing of how much stronger Jasper is than Julia, and like how much more powerful he is, and like that he just wanted to like take care of her and like her like gentle, delicate, feminine body and all of that. Again, that's something that's going to vary a lot person to person, but I just wanted to mention that. And that actually brings me to one of the big detractions of this book for me, and unfortunately that is Jasper. Like, I didn't dislike him. He was fine. He's by no means one of the worst love interests I've read, but compared to how much I really loved Julia and I really cared about her, I just didn't care about Jasper. I didn't find him super interesting, even aside from some of his frustrating decisions, which I will say also that his initial decisions make a lot of sense. I'm talking about in this book, you know, some of the choices he made. But like, even aside from those frustrating aspects, I just didn't find him nearly as compelling as Julia. And because I didn't care about Jasper, I didn't care about the romance. And that is like literally the main point of this book. So it's actually pretty impressive that I enjoyed so many other things about it enough to somewhat balance that. Because again, this is a romance. You need to care about the romance. And then another thing about the romance that, again, will vary a lot person to person. I don't like when we're told how hard it is for the hero to like resist the female lead. Like, and that's supposed to be like romantic, because like they agree at the beginning that there's going to be no like consummation until like a certain period of time or until they're both ready, which I love that they started out with that. We got that out in the open. I've mentioned before how it really irritates me in historical books when that's not like the book is written in a way that you don't know what's going to happen with that, because that is like a consent issue for me. So I really like that that didn't happen here. But I don't like the number of times that we were told that Jasper's having such a hard time sticking to this deal. Like, it's supposed to be romantic, and of course he would like never do anything about that, but like I just don't find it romantic to hear over and over how difficult it is for the hero to listen to what the heroine wants. And it wasn't in like a dangerous way. Like, I don't mean it to sound like Jasper was like the book was making you think that Jasper was going to like force himself on her or anything. Like, that wasn't, I don't think, ever like something that I genuinely worried about, but I just don't understand why we were supposed to find it cute or romantic that he was like having so much difficulty with this. Like, I don't really know how to explain it. It's like, yeah, that's fine if you find her attractive and if you are like looking forward to like, you know, physical intimacy or whatever, but I feel like there are ways to do that that doesn't make it feel uncomfortable and doesn't make it feel like we're supposed to swoon over the fact that like one character really, really wants to have sex before the other one is ready. But like, he's such a good guy, so he's gonna wait. It's like, that is the absolute bare minimum, you know? And then I also just don't feel like their romantic interest in each other was super well developed. As I said, I love Julia as a character, so on Jasper's side, I can kind of understand it a little more. Like, Julia's great. I understand why he would like her a lot. But apart from a couple of scenes of them interacting regarding books, which again, I really enjoyed, I don't really feel like we got a lot of information about why they cared about each other or why they were so perfect for each other outside of the physical attraction, which we hear about a lot. So I just would have liked more detail there, especially for a book that is so character focused and like fairly slow and a little bit long for a romance. I feel like we could have had so much more time spent on developing these characters' interest in each other, because I just don't buy it. And then also with the resolution of the book, as I said, I really love that Julia is such an active part of the story. Like, she is choosing to do these really pivotal things in the book. But then what I didn't like is the way that Jasper handled that at the end. And this is another case where he's not being pushy by any means, but just the way that it's like, I don't mind that he wanted to help Julia and that he was going to help Julia, but the specific thing he chose to do and the way the book framed that as like, this is the right thing, it bugged me, and I feel like it really went against some of the other messaging of the book. It's like Julia had things handled, so like I feel like he could have supported her in another way, so I didn't like that. And then also I mentioned that Julia has like social anxiety, and I had kind of a mixed experience with that because I do think that was shown really well in a historical setting. You know, obviously we don't have the same terminology for things, and I feel like Mimi Matthews did a fantastic job of like making it clear what's going on with her, using language that people would have had at the time. But then the way that some of that was handled near the end and the way Julia just kind of got over certain things, I don't know, it didn't ring true to me personally. That's another thing, of course, that's going to vary a lot depending on the reader. But I feel like maybe if that was the route we were going to go, maybe it shouldn't have been so specific that she had social anxiety, you know, like maybe it could have just been that she was very shy or something. But anyway, I made it sound like I really didn't have a good time with this book, but there were a lot of things I enjoyed about it. As I was saying, I did give The Belle of Belgrave Square 3 stars. Personally, I like the first book in this series better, but almost everybody seems to be preferring this one. So by no means take this as like the only opinion or the prevailing opinion. I would definitely, if it sounds like your thing, especially if the tropes and the elements I talked about in this video or in my previous one, I would definitely like give it a try and pick it up because a lot of people are loving it. This book is already out, and as I was saying, I did enjoy a lot of things about it. I didn't like dislike this book by any means. I just didn't enjoy it quite as much as the first book, and especially compared to how up my alley the premise sounded, I think there were parts that could have been done better. But let me know if you have read or are planning to read The Belle of Belgrave Square. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!